Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Return of the Obra Dinn. This is not my usual fare on this channel, but I'm really excited to stream it. This is a puzzle game, which was created by Lucas Pope, indie designer who also is known for the game Papers, Please. This game came out, I want to say about a year and a half ago at this point, and it is one of my all-time favorite games. It is a mystery game where you are tasked with discovering what happened to all 60 or so people on this ship. Okay, I'm going to turn the game audio down. Thank you. Let me know how that is. I can also turn it down farther. If there's any hiccups in the game audio, that's because I'm tabbing away from it to adjust my audio settings. It mutes on defocus, which is quite annoying. Alright, let's try here and see how it goes. So there were about 60 people aboard the Obra Dinn when it left from England for an Atlantic voyage, and it has come back to port completely empty. And in this game, we are the investigator, tasked with figuring out what happened to all of those people. As well as being a unique puzzle game, it is also unique in its graphic style. Lucas Pope chose to make this game in a 1-bit style, reminiscent of old computer graphics that only had, you know, color or not color to work with. So it is not, it is an homage to that style. It is rendered in a 3D environment. You can look around, everything is fully modeled, but it is displayed in this 1-bit color scheme. So right now, everything is in shades of brown, which is dark, and yellow, which is light. There are other color schemes. I like this one, it's the easiest on my eyes, but there's also, for example, blue and teal, gray and white, black and white, dark green and white, blue and green, and so on. All of which are named after different computers that had those color schemes. I really like the menu in this game while I'm looking at it. Everything is written on a descriptive scale, so the look sensitivity, for example, isn't just less to more. It is from nearly motionless to struggleish. Just slow. Slow side of perfect. Perfect. Fast side of perfect, reasonably fast, unreasonably fast, and a parity of control. So I have mine set to just slow for the look sensitivity, and my audio volume is set to comfortably loud. Other than that, let's go ahead and begin. I have 2 saves already stored on this computer out of the 3 I'm allowed to store. So I will go ahead and begin the empty one. Lost at Sea, 1803. The good ship Obra Dinn. Built 1796, London. 800 tons, 18-foot draught. Captain R. Witterell. Crew, 51 men. Last voyage to Orient. Cape rendezvous unmet. Contact East India Company London office for enquiries or testimony. This is a poster or a newspaper advertisement. The Honorable East India Company. Attention. Chief Inspector, Insurance and Claims, London office. The Obra Dinn has returned. Dispatch to Falmouth immediately and prepare a full assessment. Written on East India Company stationery. Falmouth, England, 1807.
Company man woke me up. Said you'd need ferry to the Obra Dinn. Not many eager for that job. Seems a bit late if you ask.
I didn't.
What's in the box?
I don't know. Hoist it up in a few minutes.
Hey! How?
Carefully.
So that was a dialogue-only portion of the game, no visuals accompanying it. We have been ferried to the Obra Dinn by this boatman. There's a box on the little rowboat in front of us, and we are pulled up next to the side of the enormous ship Obra Dinn. Well, not enormous, I guess, but big enough. Certainly much bigger than this little rowboat. We have a first-person perspective on the world, can't see anything about ourselves, but we did just hear a feminine voice. We can see this guy sitting on the seat of the rowboat in front of us. He's got a little beanie on, a striped shirt, and we have a prompt, which is our hand reaching out towards the steps up the ship to go climb. So I'm going to press space and we're going to climb up this ship. On the deck we can see that the sails are in tatters. This ship definitely did not sail under its own power very recently. The ropes that are supposed to be holding things down are torn. Lots of things are just lying broken on the deck. It is definitely an abandoned ship. I don't know much of the technical terminology for equipment on a ship, so you'll have to forgive me for describing things in as much detail as I can muster. I see a couple coils of rope on the deck, and walking towards the front, we have stairs up to the top part of the deck, which is over the place where I would expect the captains or the passenger cabins to be, the fancier cabins. Up on top, some more rope. Out in the distance, off to the right, there's something sparkling out in the water. And that's very strange. Out in the horizon. Going back to the main deck and looking towards the passenger cabins, and we have a corpse on the ground right in front of the doorway, which would be into this berth of cabins. This is somebody wearing a dark jacket and light pants. It's hard to tell anything else about this corpse because it is old enough to be just a skeleton. There are some flies, but not much else.
Oi! It's too heavy!
That was our boatman yelling at us. Better go see what he wants. Gonna climb back down over the side here.
It's too heavy. Take it yourself or open it here.
Alright. I'm being prompted to open the box here. And inside is a book. No title on the cover, nor on the spine. Opened up to the first page, it says, Return of the Obra Dinn, a catalogue of adventure and tragedy, 1807. One page further, Preface. I trust that you now find yourself aboard the Obra Dinn. I expected this day to come. and my every intention was to tell the ship's strange tale within the pages of this book. Regrettably, failing health has allowed me to produce only the basic outline that follows. Your presence on the Obra Dinn is critical. I leave the discovery of its fate and the completion of this book in your hands. The next few pages will seem bewildering at first. All will make sense in time. Use the pocket watch to determine the identity and fate of everyone aboard. Complete each chapter accurately, and return the book by guaranteed post to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. The bargain chapter will remain unknown to you. I possess the details within, but have elected to keep them private for now. Signed, Henry Evans. And now we have the table of contents of this book that Mr. Henry Evans, whoever he may be, has left us. So we have 10 chapters, plus a bit of matter at the front and at the back. Each chapter has a name, which seems to detail part of the voyage. So we have 1, loose cargo, 2, a bitter cold, 3, murder, 4, the calling, 5, unholy captives, 6, soldiers of the sea, 7, the doom, 8, bargain, 9, escape, and 10, the end. Then at the beginning we have a map of the voyage that the Obra Dinn was supposed to take. It was supposed to leave from Cornwall, the area of Cornwall, England, sail south past Spain, along the western coast of Africa, through Madeira, the Canary Islands, and Cape Verde. Then it was supposed to sail along the coast of Africa to the Cape of Good Hope and further east. We don't know how far it made it. We will find out as we go. We have the deck plans of the Obra Dinn, sort of top-down architectural plans of each deck. We can see that there are 4 decks. The main deck, which we've been standing on here, the gun deck, the orlop deck, that's O-R-L-O-P, and the cargo hold. Then we have a list of everyone who was aboard the ship with their name, role aboard ship, and their national origin, as well as a blank for us to fill in their fate once we know it. We are tasked with figuring out what happened to every single one of the 60 souls aboard this ship. And to help with visually identifying them, we have a set of sketches of the crew. 3 different sketches, among which contain everyone aboard. The first one is called Underway and has a scene of crew members drinking, playing cards, playing dice, and dancing. We have a scene called Formosan Royalty, which just has 4 individuals, 2 who seem to be royals and 2 who seem to be guards. And the third sketch is called Justice at Sea and depicts an execution by firing squad over the side of the ship. And then we have the chapters, all of which are currently blank because we have no information except for the chapter titles. I'm paging through all of those to get to the end where we have a glossary of major terms, which I might need to reference, and then a tracker which will tell us how many of the 60 fates we have solved. Currently, obviously, at 0. So now I'm going to go ahead and close the book. The next thing in the box that we opened is a pocket watch. It says, Memento Mortem, remember death. We're now holding it in our left hand. So I'm going to go back on the ship. And now now equipped with our journal and pocket watch, I'm gonna go back to that corpse. Now what's gonna happen here, and I can say this because I've played the game before, is we're going to use the pocket watch to travel back in time, so to speak, to the moment of this person's death. We will see a freeze frame scene that we can walk around in to observe who was there, how he died, well, he or she, how they died, and what was happening at that time. I don't know why the box was so heavy. That's a great question. I don't know why the box was so heavy if all it had was a book and a pocket watch. It must be a heavy book. Or a really, like a metal box or something. Or the guy's just lazy. Yeah, lead-lined. I mean, as we'll see in a moment here, this pocket watch is magical or something. So we're gonna go back in time. We'll see a freeze frame and a 1 minute long soundtrack will play, during which I have scripted for myself a description of the scene that I can hopefully read within 1 minute while we observe. Also, before we get into the freeze frame, an audio clip will play that describes the moments right before this death. So, I'm standing over the body, going to activate the pocket watch. It's rewinding, and the hands stop at 10 and 1.
Captain! Open the door! Kick it in. Lest we break it down and take more than those shells! You bastards may take exactly what I give you!
We're standing in a doorway, opening up to a short hallway. A few paces away, in an open door frame, stands a man with his right foot forward. He's shirtless, his hair is slicked back, and he has a thick mustache, but no beard. His face is set in a determined scowl. His right arm is raised, holding a pistol. A particle spray indicates that the gun has just fired. Turning around, we see a man who's been shot in the chest, starting to fall backward. He's wearing a long, dark military jacket, open over his bare chest. He has an axe in his right hand, and his mouth is open in shock. Another man, wearing a knit cap and a simple shirt, stands behind his right shoulder with his arm raised in front of his face in fear. The book slams down on the table, flipping to the scene that we are looking at. Chapter 10, The End. Taking place west of Madeira, en route. Part 1, outside the captain's quarters. So, we have now reached our first entry in the book. This is chapter 10, part 1. On the page for this part, we have the illustration of the person who has just died with a piece of paper slapped over it saying, "Who is this? How did they die?" Then we have some information about the scene. We have a transcript, which we can open up, that will remind us of the dialogue we just heard. The dialogue spoken by the deceased is marked with an X. So we can see from the transcript that the man who is speaking with a Scottish accent, "Lest we break it down and take more than those shells." Apologies for my bad reproduction there. That was the man who died. We can open up to the map of the ship and see the location of the corpse, which is on the main deck, right outside the door to the captain's quarters. And we can open up the sketches of the crew to see who was present in the scene. Now, from the sketch, it says 3 other people than the deceased were present, but we only saw 2 right there, so we may have to investigate the scene further. So if we open this person's portrait here on the page, who is this? How did they die? We don't have any information on who this is. We did hear the word captain spoken in that scene, which indicates to me that the shooter is probably the captain. But we don't know who this is. So we get the prompt to name him, and we get the prompt to explain how he died. For his fate, we have a whole list of options we can choose from. Alive, axed, burned, clawed, clubbed, crushed, decapitated, drowned, eaten, electrocuted, expired, exploded, fell, froze, illness, killed, parenthesis, sword, knifed, poisoned, shot, speared, spiked, strangled, struck, suicide, or torn apart. There's a lot of just really intriguing options in this list. The pretty clear one here for me is shot. It was obviously the pistol that killed him. And when we click shot, it gives us a sub-menu, arrow, cannon, or gun. It was a gun. This unknown soul was shot with a gun by, now we have the prompt to name the killer. And I think we can be pretty confident that the killer was the captain. Looking at the crew list here, the captain is number 1 on the list. That is Robert Witterell, the captain of national origin of England. If you fill in a wrong answer, that's a good question. So my answers right now are written in sort of a scribbly handwriting font. If I put in correct answers, that is, I correctly identify the person, the method of death, and the killer, for 3 entries, all 3 of those will go from handwritten to typeset in the book. They will be placed in permanently to confirm that I got a round of 3 correct. But unfortunately, you can't know until you've completed 3. So if it's wrong, or if you just haven't completed 3 yet, it'll stay handwritten and up for guessing. But right now we don't even have this person's name, so it couldn't be confirmed or disconfirmed. So I'll go ahead and close that. If we close the book, we hear that door unlocking sound, which means that somewhere in this scene, we're back at the gunshot scene. Somewhere in here there's a door that has opened, letting us go back to the real world. Now I know there's somebody else we have to find here, so I'm going to walk around a little bit, because the picture said there were 3 other people here, and I've only seen 2 so far. So if I walk towards the captain, I can't actually get around him into his room. He's standing, his model is completely blocking the doorway. I can't get past. I'll get a better look at him though. He's got long hair, sort of pulled back. He's got thick sideburns, thick eyebrows, thick mustache, just a sort of dark-featured man. He is shirtless, I believe. Yeah. Got some capris on. Quite a look. Pistol firing. The man he's shooting. Again, he's got this dark jacket with shiny buttons. He's got long pants on with a black belt. He has an axe in his right hand. Looks like a wood chopping axe, not a fighting axe. The guy beside him isn't holding anything, just has his knit hat. He also has dark sideburns, it looks like. I'm going to be describing a lot of things with the words dark and light instead of specific colors, because again, this game is in one bit, so it's hard to tell if anything is, you know, the intended color value of anything. Now I can go around and go up to the top deck above the cabins. And up here I see I've found the fourth person. It is another man. This guy is bald. He has a loose, light shirt, short-sleeved. He is climbing up the stairs to the right side of the upper deck. Looks like he's making some haste about it. He's got his hands on the railings, pulling him upward. And he is holding a knife between his teeth. He seems determined to get someplace. So, very curious. I believe I've seen all that I can see in this image, so I'm going to go ahead and leave. One of the quirks of this game that they don't really explain, but you conveniently find out, is that anytime you see a door or a hatchway or any type of entrance open in a memory, it will automatically open in real life. So before, the door to the captain's cabin had been closed to us, but now that we've seen it open, since the captain was shooting through it, it is now open for us in the present. So we can go ahead and walk through that. There's a room to the left without much in it. There's an empty bunk, a chair and an end table, and a small window. Nothing in that room. But in the captain's room, there are 2 corpses on the floor. One close to the door where the captain had been standing to shoot, and one further away. This room is pretty large. It takes up the entire sort of front section of the ship here, below the top deck. The windows out the front are slanted. That is tilted forward. The top of the window is farther out than the bottom. There's a large table that's been tipped over on its side. There's a chair that's upside down in here. There's a couple of knives on the floor. There's a stick on the floor. And these 2 bodies. So I'm going to look at the closer one first. The watch rewinds to 10 and 2.
Where are they? Must be in here someplace.
They're at the bottom of the sea.
That's a lie.
We're standing in this large room with its overturned furniture, positioned at the shoulder of the man with the knit hat. He's holding a wooden stick in his right hand, and his face is scrunched up in pain because the captain, directly in front of him, facing us, has just swung a knife, cutting Hatman's throat, which is beginning to gush blood. Blood is also following the arc of the knife through the air. Moving around the 2, we can see that the captain has dropped the pistol from the previous scene on the floor, and turning around, the man in the jacket is lying dead back in the hallway. His axe is discarded on the ground beside him, and he's lying in a pool of blood. The book flips to Chapter 10, Part 2. Inside the captain's quarters. Who is this? How did they die? So again, we have the illustration of the man with the knit hat. And we don't have any information about his identity. We can also confirm that we don't have any information about him because the illustration we're being given is fuzzy, it is blurry. It is as if someone has taken this pencil drawing and smudged it. that means that the game knows that we do not have information to determine this man's identity yet. So it is telling us, don't worry about it. You definitely can't do this. We do know how they died, because we did just see him get knifed in the throat. So I'll leave it saying this unknown soul. We don't know who this is, but we can change it from met an unknown fate to, go down this list, to knifed by the captain, Robert Literal. And again, it won't confirm this for us until 1, we have his name, and 2, we have 3 fates complete. The sketch shows us that 2 others were present. So in the previous scene there were 4 people, now there are 3 because one of them has died. That means that the guy with the knife must still be around somewhere. We'll have to go back out and look for him. So there's our door opening. I can walk back out of the captain's quarters and go up to the top deck to look for our knife man, knife teeth. I don't see him up here on the top deck. That's curious. Maybe I can see him from one of the windows. If I go through the captain's quarters here, there's a sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, but there's a walk around the outside. Sort of a porch off the front of the ship. And going out on that porch, I can see, there he is. Knife Teeth Man has jumped off the front of the ship, is jumping down onto the little deck here. Still holding his knife in his teeth. It looks like he's coming around the back to maybe be part of this mutiny, this ambush, whatever this is. All right. I think we've seen what we can see here. So now we're still in the captain's room, and we can go look at the other corpse, which is near the far door. I have a suspicion that this may be the corpse of Knife Teeth Man, since it is in that corner of the room. We'll go ahead and open this up. The watch stops at 10 and 3. We're standing in the far corner of the captain's room, over the shoulder of the man who had been sneaking over the back with the knife. He's falling backwards because of a direct hit to the face by the wooden stick that Hatman had been carrying, now being wielded by the captain. This man's knife is lodged in the captain's side, below his ribs, and it looks like the captain may be collapsing to his knees, off balance after swinging the stick. A big sweep of dusty particles shows the arc of the stick upward toward Knife Man's head. Behind them, the man with the hat is lying on the ground, clutching at his cut throat as he begins to bleed out. And across the room, a side door is now open that wasn't open before. Chapter 10, Part 3, Inside the Captain's Quarters. So we have once again a blurry sketch, we won't know who this is, of the man carrying the knife. Who is this? How did they die? Now, once again, we don't have information to tell who this is, but we do know his fate. I'll have to figure out what the correct word is for bashed in the face with a stick. It's not knifed. It's not shot. We have struck. Oh, that's for being struck by a beast. The sub-options for that are hooves, tail, and wing. That's not correct. Clubbed, that's it. That's what it is when you're hit with a stick. You're clubbed by Robert Literal Captain. No transcript for this one, as it was all fighting sounds. And only one other person was present. Now, I guess I could use the sketch here. I can zoom in on the sketch of the only other person present, who is the captain. I would recognize that mustache anywhere. And fill in his name. This person's face is no longer blurred, which means that they can now be identified. Use the book and the pocket watch to gather enough information to deduce their identity. Revisit memories on the ship using the pocket watch to study relationships, appearances, and activities. Use the book maps, crew manifest, and artist sketches, along with individual conversation logs, to find clues about this person. There were 60 people on the ship when it left England. Determining everyone's identity and fate will not be easy. Decisive information is rare. You will have to make assumptions using partial information. Some identities may only be revealed through a process of elimination. Good luck. Thanks, game. Oh, it's so dramatic. I love it. Alright, so that was the mini tutorial on identification. So if I click unknown on this man's portrait, I will bring up the crew list, and I can confidently identify this as Captain Robert Witterell. Now, whenever I hover over him in the sketch, it will show his name and rank. You're right, the music was very dramatic when the developer was telling us how difficult it was going to be. I've also just, now going back into the scene, I've received a prompt here to press E to zoom in on a person. If I zoom in on the captain here, it will blur the background of the scene, highlighting him like it's a green screen, and bring up the sketch behind him, showing who he is in the sketch. Which is helpful because right now he's not wearing his uniform, nor his hat. He is shirtless, has a knife in his side, and is really only recognizable by the mustache. In addition, we can press Tab while the person's highlighted with E. Open the book while examining a face to flip directly to the sketch. Thanks. Yeah, so there's the sketch. So just another way to look at who that is. But I did hear the door open, so we're gonna leave this scene. The game is also prompting me to use Tab to open the book while I'm looking at this body. Open the book while the pocket watch is open to flip directly to the relevant page. I should say, while we're looking at the body, the pocket watch is open and the hands are pointed to the chapter and number of the scene that body corresponds to. So when I'm looking at Hat Man's corpse, it is pointed to 10 and 2. If I look at Knife Teeth Man, it's at 10 and 3. And now there's a door open to us that was not open before. This looks like the adjoining bedroom or something to these quarters. And there is a body on the ground in here, a skeleton. There's also something in the bed. There's another body in the bed. A skeleton covered in a blanket lying in the bed. Which is creepy. I'm gonna look at the body on the ground. The watch rewinds, 10 and 4.
Abigail, your brother, my friend. I shot him dead. I'll be with you soon, my love. Please forgive me for everything.
We're standing in the side room, looking down at the captain who's seated in a chair. He has the pistol in his hands, pointed upward at his face, and a huge explosion of particles and blood spatter indicate that he has just shot himself. He's leaned forward, his elbows on his lap in a hunched, resigned posture. A trail of blood drops leads back to the room where he had been stabbed in the side by Knife Man, who is now lying dead with his skull caved in, next to Hat Man, who has bled out from his throat wound. The stick has been discarded on the ground, and everyone is dead. Chapter 10, Part 4. So now that it is the captain's death, his picture is already clear for us and his name has already been filled in. Since we already have identified his name to his face, our prompt here says, Captain Robert Witterell met an unknown fate. And we know the fate that was. It was suicide by gun. The other options are suicide by knife, noose, or spear, which is interesting. Now that we've completely filled in the name and fate for one person, the game is prompting us. This may or may not be correct. Fates are validated in sets of 3. Correctly identify at least 3 people and their fates to have the information typeset into the book. Okie dokie. So we may be pretty sure that's correct, but we'll find out when we get 3 things filled in. Now, the dialogue he gave us just there is pretty revealing. Abigail, first of all, that's a name. As a woman's name, and there probably weren't that many women on this ship, considering it was the mid-1800s. Abigail, your brother, my friend, I shot him. Which tells us that Abigail was probably the captain's wife, or somebody important, and her brother was the man from 10 part 1 the first scene we saw who got shot. So I'm going to open up the crew list here. And I'm also going to take a moment to throw it in the chat. Thanks to Nightbot, I have a Google spreadsheet where I've copied the text from the crew list so that it is readable by a screen reader, if anyone would like to look at it with me. So, on the crew list here, we have, starting with number 1, Robert Witterell, captain. I'm going to go down and look for somebody called Abigail. All right, I see that crew member number 19, Abigail Hoskett Witterell, was a passenger from Scotland. That is the only Abigail I see. So her maiden name there, Hoskett, probably relates to her brother, who is the man shot in the first scene. So I'm going to look for another Hoskett. I don't see one further down the list. I'm going to go back to the top. Oh, there he is, number 2. William Hoskett, first mate, from Scotland. So that must be Abigail's brother. So I'm going to walk back out here into the hallway and zoom in on him, who's dead out here. It'll bring up his sketch. And indeed, he is now cleared up, which means we now have the information to identify this man. So I'm going to say William Hoskett, first mate, was shot with a gun by Robert Witterell. And it won't confirm us yet, because that's only our second deduction. Now, unfortunately, in his dying monologue, the captain didn't give us anything else. So our other 2 crewmates here are still a mystery. That's unfortunate. Okay, it's time to head out from this scene. Chapter 10. 4 deaths. We've now completed a chapter. Our first, the book's last. And knowing that that's the last chapter in the book, we can be pretty confident that these were the last 4 people to die on the ship. Everyone else must have already been gone. The captain was the last one to go. So, the next thing we have to investigate, I guess, is the body in the bed, who I'm suspecting might be Abigail. Although it's really a skeleton here, so who knows? The watch rewinds to 7 and 8. We're standing on the top deck of the ship, looking down at Abigail, who has just been struck across her face and upper body by a huge falling beam. A lantern is flying through the air. Streaks of rain are pounding down onto the deck. Waves of water can be seen crashing over the sides. Next to her, a man in a dark jacket is stumbling, losing his balance, and is falling forward. All around them, the deck is full of people. Gaping, stumbling, dying, firing weapons. Because, at the edge of the ship, huge tentacles are suckering and gripping the ship, tearing it apart. I didn't time that one very well. I had extra time. All right, this is chapter 7, The Doom. Part 8. Inside the captain's quarters. The corpse was moved post-mortem. Who is this? How did they die? So we have a portrait. It is a young woman with dark hair, dark eyebrows. In the sketch, she seems to be dancing. She's in the top portion of the sketch, dancing with a couple of other women. And she's clear. Her sketch is not blurry, so we know we can identify her. This must be Abigail, the captain's wife. I'll go ahead and identify her there. And we can identify her fate. She was... well, she had a beam fall on top of her. She was crushed by a beast, cannon, cargo, rigging, or stones. I believe that beams and the mast and such are technically part of the rigging. So I'm going to say rigging. Well done. 3 fates correct. Abigail confirmed. William Hoskett confirmed. Captain Robert Witterell confirmed. Alright, we got our first 3 fates. It's a set of 3. Alright, well now it's taken me to the end of the book with the tracker. So I'm going to page back to chapter 7, where we were, and look at the rest of this scene. Because she also mentioned somebody by name. She said, Martin, where is the captain? Which means that the person standing near her here, who lost his balance, he's the only person really close to her in this scene. That must be Martin. So I'm gonna zoom in on him, look at him in the book, and see if there's a Martin on the crew list. I do see that Martin Perrott, Perrott, is the 3rd mate. I'm just going to look and make sure there isn't another one. I think that's a relatively common name. I see a Marcus, but no other Martins. So I'm going to say that this is Martin Perrott, the 3rd mate. And as we're back in this scene, our pocket watch hand is out, which it isn't usually when we're in a memory like this, and our hand is shaking. It's telling us we need to take action. So I'm going to press space and see what happens here. As this bell tolls, the entire scene has gone dark, with only a few patches of light. This heartbeat drum thing is pulsing light through the scene, and we are being drawn to one outlined figure across the deck. A corpse which is being dragged by a silhouetted crew member. If we walk towards it, the pocket watch opens, which its hands are ticking wildly. We have to investigate this memory within a memory. As I investigate it, the corpse glows, the watch glows, and we are returned to the present, standing in the captain's quarters. But our watch is smoking, it looks like, with this rattle. If I activate it, a cloud of smoke comes out of it and is moving through the air, leading us out to the main deck and highlighting the location of that body. So now we have a spectral, cloudy form of that corpse that we saw in the memory now on the deck for us to look at. So I'll go ahead over here and open it up. The watch rewinds to 7 and 7. Here we're looking directly upwards into the air. Heavy rain is falling all around us. An enormous tentacle is wrapped around a man who has visible spiral tattoos all over his bare chest and face. The tentacle is holding him upside down in the air. His left arm is free, and his fingers are clenched in agony. His mouth is open, screaming in pain. There's a sword stabbed through the tentacle just below where it has him in his grip. Backing away, we see a bald crew member in a striped shirt who's pointing a spear up at it. And there are other crew members with ropes, guns, and lanterns all around the deck. A little further away, one person is lying dead in a pool of blood nearby, and all around more tentacles are attacking the rigging and the ship. This is Chapter 7, Part 7. Who is this? How did they die? Now, the illustration here of this man who has these tattoos all over his chest in the illustration, and as we saw in the memory, his picture is partly cleared, which means that if we were to make some great leaps of logic and deduction, we could technically identify this person now, but it is more difficult than what we've seen so far. So I'm not going to try and identify him here. We do know how he died. He was squished, crushed, torn apart. He was tentacled to death. I don't want to say strangled because it wasn't at the neck. That feels like a neck word to me. I think I'm going to go ahead and say torn apart by, and we get to choose an attacker, which is funny. We could blame somebody for this. But at the top we do have non-humanoid attackers. We can say an enemy, vaguely, or a beast. So I will say, this unknown soul was torn apart by a terrible beast. And as we go back into the scene, looking around, our pocket watch is out again and vibrating, which means we have another scene within a scene to investigate here. It is the man lying in the pool of blood on the deck. So I go over to him. The pocket watch is confused. The hands are ticking all around. And I will activate that. So we're back on the main deck, standing above this ghostly corpse that we just saw. And the pocket watch is going to lead us with its smoke cloud. Just traveling in a very dramatic, big loop. Taking a long time to travel about 10 feet across the deck. To redraw the ghostly corpse of this person. So we're rewinding to 7 and 6. We're looking again directly upwards into the air. An enormous explosion fills the entire field of view, its particles streaking across the screen. In the center, we can see the form of a crew member silhouetted within the blast. A rope stretches from him back to the deck, where another crewman is holding the rope with one hand, looped around himself, and is shielding his face with the other. The deck of the ship is steeply tilted to the left, and everyone is struggling to stay on their feet. One of the monster's tentacles, which had grabbed this now exploded crew member, is caught up in the blast, and several others are flailing wildly nearby. Stairways open to below deck, and several people are losing their balance trying to come up the stairs. Chapter 7, Part 6. This crew member, I didn't really get a good look at because he was in the middle of this explosion. We couldn't see anything about him at all. In the illustration, he has short, dark hair. He has some sort of dark jacket. The illustration is fuzzy. We can't identify him yet, so I can't really see the details. We do know his fate. He exploded. The game says he was blasted by an explosion. That's fine. I accidentally closed the book. Okay. 5 others were present in this scene. I haven't been looking at the illustrations for all of these scenes because there have been a lot of people present. In Part 8, 10 others were present. In Part 7, 12 others were present. There's been a lot of people on deck for these, and we'll probably need to go back and look at them more thoroughly to get more information out of them. But in any case, this poor unknown soul, I guess, had some gunpowder thrown at him, or he was holding some gunpowder and got shot. I'm not sure why the gunpowder went off, whether it was intentional or not. Certainly him being in it was probably unintentional. Quite a tragedy. Quite a way to go, being picked up by a monster tentacle and then also exploded. It's interesting because the deck of the ship is so steeply tilted in this scene. The doorway leading us back to the present, and because now we don't have a corpse within a corpse to look at, is actually level, which means that relative to the ship's deck, it is tilted off the ground, which makes for a very silly image here. Just a floating, tilted doorway in space. And because we saw the stairwell, the stairs down to the next deck were open in that scene, they are now open to us in the game. And I think even though this has been a shorter stream, I am probably going to leave it there before we go downstairs. I know from having played this before that downstairs is where the game really starts to open up and get non-linear with the order in which you experience the story events. I mean, it's already been non-linear for sure. We started at the end, we looked at chapter 10, then we looked at chapter 7 backwards, but the scenes were presented to us in a specific order, and once we start investigating further, that will change. So we'll really have to start keeping on top of what we know and when we know it. So, without further ado, I think that's where I'm going to call it for tonight on Return of the Obra Dinn. I will be updating the Google Doc that I made with the, I think, 3 people we identified so far. The captain and his wife Abigail and the first mate, whose name I've already forgotten. And we identified Martin. So that's 4. 3 confirmed. So, I'm just randomly walking around the ship as I talk. It's, despite all of the murder and corpses, it's actually kind of a peaceful ship to stand on. Just in the breeze, hearing the creaking of the deck, some waves. Very nice. Alright, so I will plan to return to this later this week. I will get the Google Docs updated. Again, that is, I'll throw it in the chat here again. On Google Sheets, so that we can all look at who's available, and I'm going to sign off for tonight. You can find me on Twitter at CEL10E. That's the same username as here. And I have some of my Crusader Kings stuff on YouTube at the same username as well. Thanks very much. Good night.